So today I'm going to talk about foretelling the future, and maybe a little history too. Oh, okay. Oh, thank you. Okay. Okay. Here we go. Since the time of the Temple of Apollo, once home to the Oracle of Delphi, over the years, people have been obsessed with fortune-telling and foretelling the future. The Oracle at Delphi was a priestess who made predictions about the future. Sometimes the Oracle would offer observations. More often, she would offer slightly ambiguous predictions. Perhaps the most famous was the Oracle's prediction to King Croesus of Lydia, which is in the country of Turkey today, that if he went to battle against his enemy, King Cyrus of Persia, he would, quote, destroy a great empire, end quote. Encouraged by this prediction, Croesus took up the famous battle at Sardis, also located in Turkey today, only to discover that the empire to be destroyed was his own great empire. Oops. In religious books from centuries ago, stories of prophets were considered divinely anointed to predict the future. But are we only reading about the predictions that were accurate? Are the stories put into books only when the prophets were right? Why would you repeat a story about a predicted event that went opposite to the prediction? Like the story I just relayed about King Croesus. How many of you actually heard or remember this from history? Not very many. Many people have mistaken the idea that spiritualist mediums can predict the future. People come to a spiritualist medium for a reading. Expect them to divine the future. Spiritualism's views on predicting the future is that is of little importance, because spiritualism's main purpose in giving readings is to prove the continuity of life. Spiritualism proves not only that we continue to exist consciously after the death of the physical body, but we are responsible for our actions while here on the earth plane. We cannot escape the consequences of our acts, good or bad. Over time, we exercise greater care not to hurt others because of the spiritual consequences. At some point in our lives, we figure out we are only hurting ourselves. In this scientific age, there are no shortage of fortune tellers, both of the old world and the new. I have a question for you. Did you know the most common prediction in history is the coming of end time or the end of days? There has yet to be a generation that did not suspect it was the last before the apocalypse, and the sentiment has often reached fever pitch. I remember a story about a psychic whose name I can't remember, but I remember her story, that she claimed the world would end on a certain date. Unfortunately, she died on that date. So this world ended, but only for her. As you probably already knew, psychics and medium are different from mediums. Psychics interpret energy of a person, place, or object. And that interpretation can vary from psychic to psychic. Psychics can sometimes be wrong, and that's okay. Because at the end of the day, we are in control of our future. We have free will. A psychic may see or sense things about our future, opportunities, insights, windows of chance, but only we can make these things happen. For example, a psychic may see you doing X, but only if you do A, B, and C before that. The future is not always set in stone. Maybe, if we were less rigid in declaring what the future will be, we could be more flexible when it arrives. I'm sure you heard this story, but I'm going to tell it again. So, this is about a man who was trapped in his house during a flood. He began praying to God to rescue him. He had a vision in his head of God's hand reaching down from heaven and lifting him up to safety. When the water started to rise in his house, his neighbor urged him to leave and offered him a ride to safety. The man yelled back, "I'm waiting for God to save me." The neighbor then drove off in his pickup truck. The man continued to pray and hold on to his vision. As the water began rising in his house, he had to climb up to the roof. A boat came by with some people heading for safe ground. They yelled at the man to grab a rope. They were ready to take him to safety. He told them that he was waiting for God to save him. They shook their heads and moved on. The man continued to pray, believing with all his heart that he would be saved by God. The floodwaters continued to rise. A helicopter flew by, and a voice came over a loudspeaker, offering to lower a ladder and take him off the roof. The man waved the helicopter away, shouting back that he was waiting for God to save him. The helicopter left. The flooding water came over the roof and caught him up and swept him away. He drowned. When he reached the other side, he asked, "God, why didn't you save me? I believed in you with all my heart. Why did you let me down?" God replied, "I sent you a pickup truck, a boat, and a helicopter, and you refused them all. What else could I possibly do for you?" What I take from this story is that we are provided for in many ways, but we must do our part to accept the help that is given and not dictate what that help looks like. Predicting the future is one of the most difficult kinds of psychic phenomena to understand. This is true because it involves the enigma of time. As you may know, on the other side, the spirit world is purported to have no sense of time, since time does not seem to be an important factor to the other side. Spirits may be aware of what's happening to their loved ones, but off on the timing. I think of the other side to be similar to experiencing a dream. Have you ever just dozed off for a few minutes and had a dream? Then when you woke up, it seemed like the dream was hours long. When we are awake in this world, time seems real. Where would we be without our timepieces to wake us up or to be on time for a special event? Spiritualist mediums really try not to foretell the future. To a certain extent, this may take place in a reading. A spirit can, to a degree, predict future events with greater or lesser accuracy while communicating through a medium. Communications coming through a deceased loved one frequently refers to everyday matters because the living want to know this information about their life. When deceased loved ones visit, they do it because they love us and want to connect. Mediums have the ability to communicate with spirits through seeing them, which is known as clairvoyant, or feeling them, which is known as clairsentient, or hearing them, which is known as clairaudient. Think of it like this. If you passed your beloved grandmother on the street, wouldn't you stop and say hi? Even though our deceased loved ones are in another dimension, they still experience, know, and understand the world we live in. And they love us and want us to know it. One of my favorite old TV shows from the 1960s is Twilight Zone. It may be one of your favorite shows too. And you might remember this episode, the one starring William Shatner and Patricia Breslin, who play a pair of newlyweds driving across country when they have to stop in a small town due to car trouble. The husband, Shatner's character, starts playing a fortune-telling machine in a local diner. He becomes obsessed with the fortune-telling machine because it answers all his questions correctly. The character's obsession with knowing the future starts to concern his wife. The husband wants the fortune-telling machine to tell them where they're going to live. But his wife finally tells her husband that whether or not the fortune-telling machine can really tell the future doesn't matter, since he, the husband, is capable of making his own future. Recognizing the truth in what she says, the husband apologizes and then announces to the fortune-telling machine that they are leaving to do what they please. After their exit, a distraught older couple enters the diner. They sit at the fortune-telling machine, with the man asking questions about their fate and increasingly deflated by the answers. I'd like to end this service with the thought-provoking question. Which husband do you relate to? Are you relying on someone to tell you your future before making decisions? Or are you capable of making your own decisions, thereby making your own future and being responsible for your own life? A spiritualist would say it is the latter. Make your own future and do what you please. Amen.